nothing about the NRL.
Colin, I couldn't agree more, mate. And tune in later in the episode when you hear, how many players are there on a rugby league team?
Well, to be honest, you know...
How many rugby league teams are in the current Super League?
We have talked about you doing some as well, and I'm sure it'll happen along the way.
Yeah, but the thing is...
The bigger issue is more the prep that you'd have to be required to do to think of some questions.
I can do it, but the problem is I'd go too far the other way in an effort to challenge you and get a bit of revenge and just come up with something so obscure that it's almost impossible and ruins the feature. I feel like what you do is actually skirt the boundary quite... If I sat here every week and just, smashed it 8 out of 10 and, 8 out of 8 or whatever, then it would kind of lose some of its je ne sais quoi, because at least people are playing along and you can hear me squirt and it's more entertaining. I think if I was doing it to you, and I will do at some point, I'm quite certain, but I'll have to make sure it's kind of, it skirts that line, and I think you do that really well.
Well, I've got one planned for next week's show already. This week we're back on birthdays, so I've got a couple for you.
I haven't even looked.
No, because I've lulled you out of your programme. But
no, I asked just hurt too much today. I've struggled to function at work.
Alfie Garnett got in touch as well. He said, let the SLP listeners quiz both of you at the same time, either send in one or all questions for the lads.
We could do that. We do that about 3 times a series, Mark. It's called Ask SLP, Darren. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but that's something that comes up quite a fucking bit.
In all seriousness, like if people do want to do that, maybe for when we do Ask SLPs and get sort of a quiz coming in that way, we can sort something out maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
That'd be cool. We've got no objection for people to send in
none whatsoever
questions. It's just when people send them in to us, it gives me a chance to start thinking about them when I see them, and then by the time I've done the show, if I didn't know quickly already, I'll have worked it out and it'll kind of ruin it.
We could do Ask SLP and within that have a section called Quiz SLP.
Yeah,
and go that way, couldn't we? Right, well then the next time we do that, someone will need to remind us that we said this.
So it'll be around, the first time we'll do it, probably be around...
We're about magic time, isn't it? We normally do.
No,
it's later, isn't it?
Normally around the Challenge Cup semi-finals or final time we do the first one.
That's right, yeah.
So it'll be around Challenge Cup and sort of August time.
Yeah, so a few months to get your thinking caps on and come up with some questions to bamboozle us.
Maybe we'll do it when it's the international break round this year, actually, because we'll have spare time on that show, won't we, in, what's that, June time?
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay.
Mark at Wilco2205 said, another top show, talking about the rugby league connection to Taboo, there's actually a former Bull in it, Rob Parker.
Yeah, and I didn't spot him until this weekend. He was in this weekend's episode, fleetingly, like that. But yeah, they must have... I don't know where they get these guys, how they get the guys into it. I don't think I've known Rob Parker do any acting before, although I'm certain someone will correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, he was there looking menacing.
Isn't he like business manager at Swinton or something?
Oh, right, at Swinton. He ran the lottery at the Bulls for a short period of time.
Then he was at Lee, wasn't he? I think he's at Swinton now.
Yeah.
Unless I'm getting him confused. Sure everyone will tell me if I am. Chris McQuennion.
Yeah, him. Chris McQuennion. You've ruined it for us now, Chris, mate.
Chris McEwen got in touch. He said, listening today, I was wondering whether Dr. Bob Phillips has a dislike for Lee similar to that of Fev Tiger for Catalan. Turns out Bob does have a harsh spot for the Lee Centurions. Bit of extra spice there.
Yeah. It came as a surprise to me, that.
Bernard JKD got in touch. He said, any player on my team who I pay to play professionally and doesn't understand the new 40-20 rule gets shipped to the reserves. After Josh Jones not knowing the goalpost try rule and now Leeds players not knowing a 40-20 rule is unacceptable and unprofessional, I'd fire Barry McDermott from coaching for saying it'll take a few weeks for the players to know the new rules. Unacceptable.
Listen, you sort of make a point, but to be honest with you, I tuned in for a bit of England versus Italy yesterday afternoon. So anything that you've got to say about rugby league players struggling to learn the rules is a moot point now after having watched Italy nearly pull off the greatest fucking pants downing in rugby history yesterday. I was cheering the Italians on, Mark. As soon as I figured out what they were doing, it was hilarious. And the England lads just had no idea.
I didn't see any of it at all, but I thought, when I heard what had happened, I thought, get Darryl Clark picking up the ball at 9 there. It'd crease it, It scored a try on every play.
It took them to the second half to realise that all they had to do was run the ball straight. They were just looking at her at Tarquin. What are these Italian fellows doing? And it was absolutely brilliant.
That's
and
enough
honestly,
of that.
my allegiance went to the Italians yesterday. It was hilarious.
I take Bernard's point on board in terms of it. You'd expect in a professional environment players to be prepared about the rules, but in my experience of my own work environment, you can tell some people stuff enough in try and tell them in different ways, and they still don't get it in because they don't give a shit. And I think there's an element of some players not really caring necessarily about the rules or learning all the rules. It's more about learning the processes that they go through in the games, and if they're not coming up against the rules, they're not learning the processes. I think maybe maybe people need to be better educated. Barry McDermott, by the way, I'm not sure he does much coaching anymore. I'm pretty sure he's left his Leeds scholarship position, hasn't he?
I thought it was more like a welfare thing in terms of like coaching the lads away from the tech.
Yeah.
He'll correct us, I'm certain. But my understanding was that he works with the lads in terms of their lifestyle holistically around rugby league, so not specifically training the lads, but actually mentoring and like this sort of player guidance role, which I think is a tremendously important role for anyone to play at a rugby club, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I'm sure Barry will correct us.
Okay. Bernard also said, I let a snort of derision out when I saw that fan in the shark outfit. Hilarious now to know that it's Bradford's finest. And then he mentioned he lives in the past.
He does.
The Irish football season has matches on Friday evenings, and he also goes to other live sport over the weekend. So, because no one talks rugby league in Ireland, around where he lives, it's never mentioned in the newspapers. He can wait a few days until he has to watch the games.
There you go.
Although this weekend he managed to watch some of them on Sunday, so got some views in time for the show.
Can't tell you how happy I was to be referred to as Bradford's finest, by the way. That almost went on my Twitter bio. Who's Craig Sullivan?
Craig Sullivan's been getting in touch recently a few times, hasn't he? At Sullivano1971, if you want to follow one of our new friends on Twitter there. He said, thanks for reading out my messages on episode 130 from the 40th minute. Much appreciated, and keep up the superb work, guys. Well,
brilliant.
We don't have the show without messages from people like Craig.
Exactly.
So keep getting in touch, sending game reviews and that sort of stuff, Craig, and You'll be on the ballot for the newcomer of the year if you do that sort of attitude.
Yeah, this is exactly the sort of early season form we like for our rookies of the year, Craig. So you keep up the good work, mate.
Oliver Smith said, fantastic listening this week, guys. One of my favourites yet. I've taken you up on your recommendations of SSGB and Cigarettes After Sex. I've really enjoyed both. Keep up the great work.
Should clarify that our recommendation for Cigarettes After Sex is the name of a band and not a thing you should be doing.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, there are some young impressionable listeners out there that want Tyler, like picking up any dirty habits or anything like that. We have a moral responsibility to keep the youth safe and what have you.
Just the swearing and the boozing then.
He's from Castleford. He's having more. He's having plenty of sex. That's a given. There's not a bus stop in Castleford that hasn't been christened by someone.
Well, he's from Fev though, isn't he?
Of course, yeah.
So there's only a thin population pool to draw from.
Very shallow gene puddle.
You can get on the bus to Cass, though, I'm sure, quite easily.
There you go.
Barry McDermott got in touch at RLBarryMac10 if you want to follow him on Twitter. If you haven't come across this,
he's probably not going to be listening for much after you all get in touch and slated via our podcast.
He said,
"Cheers, kids."
He said, very entertaining pod as always, Mark and Tom. Oops, sorry I missed you on the telly. I was caught up in the moment.
Absolutely atrocious, Baz. Utterly heartbreaking.
I forgive him.
Yeah, I can't believe that you didn't immediately figure out who it was dressed as a shark. I'm hurt. I'm deeply, deeply hurt.
I can't remember which of the game. It must have been the Warrington game this week, but he fluffed a line and Eddie gave him some right stick. And considering how many times a game Eddie fluffs his line,
I know.
I felt sorry for Barry.
Do you think it's just like a gradual kind of changing of the guard? Like Eddie now, he does seem he's like all the way through some like. I was calling for 1 pointers nostalgically dead early in games this weekend, just for like Steve-O's sake. If Steve-O was still here, he'd be calling for a 1 pointer 25 minutes in. I think they're just kind of missing that. He's just not got anybody to have that old man back and forth with, has he? Anymore?
No, I think that new dynamic's working okay. I've tended to find as well the way they're operating this year. Because Steve-O's last couple of years was not Eddie, Steve-O, and then the odd other comment. It was Eddie and the plethora of people that Eddie kept bringing different ones in. I think this year they've reined that in a little bit more to, as the game's going on, only have one main co-commentator.
Yeah.
And then when there's a break in play, talk a little bit more to like Phil or Barry or what have you. Or obviously Cummins.
Yeah. No, I have no issue with the coverage. I still enjoy it very much.
Anyway, more serious stuff now. Mitchell Darts says, if the Super 8 is scrapped, what's your preferred system?
Franchising, plot twist, Bulls get in. Can you imagine? The world explodes. Actually, if you do go back to franchising and the expanders...
We're not going back to franchising.
I like yours, to be honest. I like two groups of 8.
Well, I've had my preference has been on, I've laid it out many times over 4 or 5 years, but I don't think it's realistic for our market. I'm actually rethinking a lot of the theoretical ideas that underpin sports economics when applied to our market of consumers, shall we say, as sports fans, because they all seem to want like ridiculous levels of things are going to go fucked up if you lose this game kind of scenarios.
Yeah.
And then whinge and moan mercilessly about that situation when it happens. So I find it very hard to put myself into the mindset of why people want promotion and relegation, why people want... I get why people think it's great, but when people actually understand that clubs are going to go bust, players are going to lose their jobs, and you're just going to get the same shit recycled over and over again at the bottom end, why people want it. I think we need to work out a system that can get equal level of funding to 16, 18, 20 professional teams before we can really talk about any progress at all. And we went backwards from achieving that aim in this last year because we've lost almost Bradford and Sheffield effectively we've lost us as full-time clubs, whilst Toulouse have become 3/4 time and Toronto are ostensibly full-time but in the third tier, so we've lost an element of competition in the Championship, I think, at the full-time end. So I don't know. Well,
I've always liked your conferences idea. I think that would be something that would work well and be a dynamic way to sustain the sport. But you do need 4 extra teams. So Hull KR, Bradford, Toronto,
Toulouse,
London, or Toulouse.
Yeah,
London and Toulouse can play off.
Well, you can still have some form of promotion and relegation playoff, but our season ends too late for the next one to start, for the turnaround that's required, given how little money all the clubs lower down the chain have. That's the problem. There's no money in the sport to sustain any of these pie in the sky ideas that all of us have, and it's finding a system that brings that money in. I'm not sure, like the Steve Mascord suggestion that's been carrying a lot of weight through the BBC podcast in the last week of go and get a Perth team involved and a Wellington team involved and another Brisbane team involved and that sort of thing. I'm not sure if that's the right way to go.
No.
At this time, I think work with the NRL rather than try and push against them. But it's how do you crack into the NRL to make them want to work with you? It's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah,
it's very difficult.
The distance is the problem because if they were in the same hemisphere, you could almost look at like a Champions League style tournament to run alongside a short and truncated season as a way of bringing some money in. But because of the distances involved, travelling to Australia, it's just not going to be something that you can do. If we were, a 3-hour flight away from Australia, then, that'd be something that you could perhaps moot as an idea to, first of all, encourage and reward high finishing positions in the domestic competition, and also bring in extra cash and extra focus into the sport nationally and more broadly internationally. But I may as well stop talking because Australia's thousands of
I just find it so hard to come up with a perfect solution.
There is no perfect
and maybe
solution,
the best solution was 12, 16, 5 or 16 playoff, 1 up, 1 down. Any more than 1 up, 1 down in that sort of process, I don't know how well it'd work.
1 up, 1 down.
But then it reduces the likelihood of other people wanting to invest in Championship clubs. And then I don't know, but how much investment's going into them now? It's so this. I don't know. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Paul Michael Craig says in reply to Mitchell, he says, I'd keep the Super 8s, but just over 3 rounds. Teams 1, 4, 5 and 8 play each other once, as would 2, 3, 5 and 6. Points carry over, then